Okay, here we are back again. Obviously, you don't know how awkward it is to film a video in front of an empty classroom, so usually I'm sarcastic. Sometimes I'm picking on people, but I've got nobody to pick on since all these desks are empty. So let's take a look at our second PowerPoint, okay, for the week. And we're going to take a look now that we took a look at the first two major parties. What about third parties? Okay, where do they stand in this election cycle? Why are they here? Why aren't they more prevalent? And some of you may think, well, you created another party for your last assignment. Would it uphold in the major election come in 2020, or would it fizzle out like some other major groups have had in the past? So if you take a look at what has helped them, what have they accomplished here? They did end slavery. Okay, 30 parties to come in to end slavery. They created a graduated income tax. Child labor laws were put into effect because of third parties. A lot of the progressive parties in the late 1800s, early 1900s established some antitrust laws. Unemployment compensation, so if you're unemployed, you do get some compensation for that. Obviously, the women's right to vote, which would be the 100-year anniversary next election cycle 2020 for those women that choose to vote next year for the president. So let's take a look at kind of a couple breakdowns here. So the 16th Amendment income tax, okay, was kind of a result of the Progressive Party. It's a graduated income tax that they kind of put into a law, but they forced the major two parties to think about kind of need an income tax. Okay, America's folding economically if you don't actually collect and redistribute money to help the poor. Second thing you look at here is the 17th Amendment. We did advocate, or third parties advocate, I should say, for direct election of senators in 1913. Okay, and then it eventually came to light. The 17th Amendment also increased voting power. Okay, so it took the corruption out of the Senate because state governors used to choose, the state governments used to choose the senators. Now the people actually choose through a direct election. So we have a direct election of senators, we have a direct election of House of Rep members, and you have a popular vote of the president, although we have an electoral college that can override it. Another constitutional amendment that was put forth because of third parties was the idea of prohibition. Now this one didn't work out in their favor because it was repealed by the 21st Amendment, but this women's temperance movement, the Christian temperance movement founded in Ohio in 1874, kind of talked about alcoholic beverages, okay, causing husbands to come home drunk, beat up their wives, is causing chaos in society, and they implemented it, realized that it had more cons than pros, okay, so they actually flipped it, reversed it with the 21st Amendment. Okay, another constitutional amendment that was put forth by a third party, okay, was women's suffrage, okay, they advocated for women's right to vote, and by 1920, women received it. Again, next election will be the 100-year anniversary. Now, a third party sometimes will gain success. When I mean success, they will gain notoriety, popularity, but will never win an election, and we'll talk about reasons why. So if a candidate is personally popular, okay, take Teddy Roosevelt, for example, personally popular, prior president, okay, in the early 1900s, he runs again in 1912 for the Bull Moose Party. He's popular. He gained 28% of the actual popular vote. Kind of interesting to see that phenomenon, but you have to have some familiarity with the American public. And if the major two parties are split on a controversial topic, that's where a third party can kind of gain segue into the political arena. So, 1892, the Populist Party receives about 8.5% of the popular vote, which you may deem as not a lot. Okay, but it does make an impact, okay? And because the farmers in the farming industry, with this gold versus silver standard made an impact, 1896 we started to see the conflict over gold versus silver standard. Okay, third party candidates who split the vote, okay, Teddy Roosevelt and the Bull Moose Party, he wins 27.4% of the popular vote, almost 28% of the popular vote in 1912. He splits the Republicans, so Democrat Woodrow Wilson gets elected. So unfortunately, the spoiler effect is one of the effects of a third party system, and that's a new word, that terminology that you should have, and it is in the packet, so you'll get that in a second. Here's the spoiler roll. 1912 election, Woodrow Wilson, 435 electoral votes. Teddy Roosevelt takes 88 and 27% of the popular vote. He actually took the second highest voting over William Taft, who's a Republican candidate, who only got 8 electoral votes, as opposed to the 88 that Roosevelt took into effect. Now, this was a multi-party, you had a socialist party. Eugene Debs was working under the union aspect, who was a socialist candidate, but look at how Woodrow Wilson sweeps across the country, because Teddy Roosevelt enters into the election. So there was one major spoiler roll in the early elections. Now, George Wallace, again, splits the vote, okay, in 1968. Okay, he's from Alabama. He's a segregationist, which is kind of weird for this time. In 1968, he basically talked about civil rights should not be enacted, and we should actually go backwards to allow segregation to be legal. It was too much of a conflict during this time period, and we weren't ready for it. He wins 13.5% of the vote in 68, splits the Democrats and Republicans, nominate Richard Nixon, which we know what happens to Nixon, obviously with the Watergate scandal in 1973. So here's the election. Okay, you have Richard Nixon sweeping across the country because of the splinter effect. Herbert Humphrey is your Democratic candidate, but George Wallace does pull away 46 electoral votes and about 9 million votes overall at about 13% of the vote. So if you notice, the percentage difference is almost a little over 1%. He pulls 13%, obviously fractures the party. Okay, so it splinters the party here. Now, most of you have not heard of John Anderson from 1980. Okay, not very popular in terms of notoriety with the election of Ronald Reagan, but Ross Perot in 1996 and 1992 fractured the vote for the Democrats and Republicans. Independent candidate, big businessman, okay, very wealthy, great knowledge of the economy. Splinters the vote in 92 and 96. Actually, in 92, I believe Clinton wins by a plurality of the votes, which is 48.6%. We kind of desire 50, but because he's a third-party candidate, he pulls votes away from both candidates to win the election. Okay, 1980. Okay, Ronald Reagan wins 408 electoral votes to 49 over Jimmy Carter. Okay, but that third party, okay, John Anderson takes 6% of the votes away. Okay, this would have popped into 47. It would have been a much closer race if that's the case. Okay, now here's Clinton. Okay, we're talking about, actually I thought it was 48. It's actually 43% of the popular vote. He takes 44 million votes. Notice the difference here, but Ross Perot takes 19% away from the major two parties and actually hurts George Bush's chances of winning an election. Because it does fracture the Republican Party more than the Democratic Party. Okay, so Ross Perot, again, in 96, comes about again. Okay, he wins 10% of the vote this time, not as much as the first time, 8 million votes. But the differential here is 10%. So if he wasn't running for the election, would Bob Dole have won that election over Bill Clinton for his re-election for the presidency? Now Ralph Nader, okay, in 2000, did only garner 3% of the vote. We've seen this as a modern trend where they're taking 3%, 2%. Jill Stein, okay, took about 1% on the last election cycle, which didn't really fracture the major parties, but it does split the Democratic Republican strategically. They have to think about in Electoral College how they're going to take some of his ideas and blend them into their own. Okay, 2000. Okay, this election we see 271 to 267. Now we know that Ralph Nader doesn't win any electoral votes, but he does take approximately 3% of the popular vote away. And if you notice, obviously from the election of 2000, Al Gore does win the popular vote, lose the electoral vote because of a nullified election by the state Supreme Court in Florida. We'll talk about that when we get to the idea of third parties and we actually watch Stearns and George. Now, if you look at a one-party system, this is something that people advocate for at times. It leads to obviously authoritarian governments, okay, powers of enforced of one party. This is where we see coups take place all over the country. Not very stable, okay, and not something we advocate for often. But people do have a theory that this is more stable, at least, than what we have in terms of confliction. Now, the multi-party system is another advocate. Other people advocate for this as well because it does provide political rivals, it provides competition, but think about it. You're not winning by a majority. That majoritarian model is out the window. Plurality model is in the window, and you can win by 30% of the vote and take the presidency, and we're not too comfortable with that. Okay, some characteristics, obviously, they have a few large parties, numerous small ones, usually sharply divided. They're really far left and really far right as opposed to what we have in the United States. Characteristically, okay, they're often linked to religious differences, regional differences, social class differences, and that doesn't really create a stable government, especially, it probably would not work too well in the United States, even though people advocate for it. Now, some advantages: broader representation of people, so those minority groups are actually heard in terms of numbers. They're more responsive to the people, because they have to be. Okay, give voters more choice at the polls, but the disadvantage, it causes fractions, coalitions, and dissolves very easily. It causes instability in government, okay, because you have in-house fighting quite often and it doesn't really work out too well. And again, we love the idea of a majority vote versus a plurality vote. Now here, I would start this slide particularly because they will ask you about third parties, but they'll ask you about the function of third parties. Okay, and this is a major function of third parties. They act as a safety valve. So if you're discontent with the major two parties, say the election of 2016, okay, people were discontent with Hillary Clinton, they were discontent with Trump as leading two candidates, would they have voted for a third party candidate because they're frustrated or discontent with the major two candidates? So a third party acts as a safety valve at times. They don't want it to be a wasted vote, and they will vote for somebody. They'll stay politically involved, have a high sense of political efficacy, but they cannot feasibly vote for one of the major two candidates because they just don't agree with any of their issues. They're a voice on the fringe. They will bring in alternative perspectives like income tax and some of the things we mentioned before with the women's right to suffrage and right to vote. So those come in. The spoiler effect, they will spoil other candidates from winning an election. They do address issues that the major two parties kind of are fearful of addressing. Okay, legalization of marijuana, some things that are maybe very abstract. Nader introduced elimination of the SATs and Legalization of marijuana in 2000, 2004, again, he ran as well as a third-party candidate. Not a major issue at the time period, but if this was a modern-day issue like it is in New York, okay, and many other states with legalization of marijuana, maybe this third party, if there is one in this election, would introduce that idea and would be adopted by the major two parties and force them to take a stand. Now, legalization of marijuana may be one of those issues that may come around over time in terms of more people agreeing with it, but it's still kind of bimodal in terms of distribution. Okay, major parties often take on the ideas of third parties, and then once the major parties take on their ideas, they fizzle out. Okay, there's no need, they don't stand for anything anymore. The major two parties have already adopted part of their platform. Okay, and they do get more people to participate. Those independent voters, those young voters. Okay, Bernie Sanders got a whole slew of young voters to come out in the last election cycle, even though he was running on the Democratic ticket, but he's an independent in Vermont, ironically enough. So minor parties, okay, are often indicators of change, reflect popular concern over an issue at the time. We don't see many of this right now in modern era in terms of 2020's election. So here's some types of minor parties. Some are ideological. Libertarian and Constitution Party are ideological, different thought processes on the economy, on government, on military. Economic protest parties have come about over time. The Greenback Party, okay, the Socialist Party, and the Communist Party, okay, in the United States politics over an economic issue. And then the Splinter Party, they're there to just kind of fracture the major two parties: Bull Moose Party, Progressive Party, and the Reform Party. So those are different types of minor parties. And most of them fall on the line of single issue. They have a single issue they stand for, and once that single issue is adopted by the major two parties, see you later, we fizzle out. Okay, so the ideological party, if you just break it down, obviously comes into Libertarian, Communist, okay, the Economic Protest Party, Greenback, Socialist, and Communist Party. You'll never need to know that specifically, but just know there are multiple different types of parties out there. And obviously your single issue party deals with an issue: prohibition. Rights Life Party, Green Party, advocating for one single issue itself. Okay, and then your splinter party's purpose is to fracture the major two parties. Now, they play important roles. The major one that you would highlight if it's a function of third parties is the splinter or spoiler party, spoiler role. So the minor candidates can pull divisive votes away from the major two candidates and create some type of splinter effect, and that's their main goal. Okay. Minor parties, especially on single issue parties, often criticize the major two parties on specific issues that they're ignoring. And sometimes they're innovators. They bring about new ideas that the major two parties are too stale to actually bring about. And they actually bring new solutions and innovative solutions to problems that the Republicans can't compromise on because they're constantly in gridlock. Now, we talked about the National Committee. Okay, we talked about the platform. This was on the last slideshow, so let me just kind of quickly go through this again. Okay, the problem with third parties is to why they cannot get elected, and you just, or I think in the plans you're either doing this after or before, you'll see why third parties can't get into the political arena. Okay, they have to have a certain number of signatures on the ballot in all 50 states to actually get on the ballot, where the major two parties don't need it. They have to prove 15% popularity on 5 major public opinion polls. Okay, that's kind of difficult nationwide. 15%, if you notice, all third parties, most of them are 3% in favorability. It's only Ross Perot and Teddy Roosevelt, okay, who both had name recognition, that garnered over 15%. So you don't get invited to debates unless you have that 15% mark. Okay, so there's a lot of barriers holding third parties back from actually getting elected. Now, the problem is, okay, the future of major parties, we don't know. Okay, more people are unwilling to label themselves Democrat or Republican. So let's see the evolution of this over time. In the next 10 or 15 years, are younger people that are more progressive going to start labeling themselves, or are they going to break the mold? Okay, and that's most of you people sitting in the room right now, especially moving forward over the next 10, 15, or 20 years. Okay, a lot of people are voting split ticket. I would highlight this too. Okay, you're voting for candidates from different parties, so you're not sticking with Republicans and Democrats. We're creating this divided party government where presidents of one party, Congress of another, and we think there's a happy balance there. And it causes them to kind of reach across the aisle and compromise, even though modern congressional politics is not happening. Now for candidates, okay, the structural changes have an increased conflict. There's disorganization amongst the party. They can agree within their own party as to what they want. Change in technology and campaigning have brought about, okay, the future of major parties in terms of how they reach across the internet, use social media, use Facebook. We saw obviously the infiltration in an election of Russian interference, which is proven through social media. Okay, and then the growth of the single issue organizations kind of they're getting financial support. So the Right to Life group, okay, is getting financial support. People are supporting these issues. So if you look at it, going back just to recap, third parties have a major difficult time penetrating the political arena. I want you to think about, what if we had a third party that was competitive? Okay, would it be a compromising third party that would bring both ideas from Republicans and Democrats and appease the masses? And if that was the case, would that make our political arena less divisive and more compromising? Okay, less gridlock. Okay, have a great day. Okay, you'll finish up your assignment for the rest of the day, and hopefully I'll be back the next couple of days and hopefully learn something. Have a good day.